Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Interesting People. And I'm not sure I could have a more special guest for the first episode if I tried. It is someone very close to me. It is a clinical psychiatrist, and it's also my brother. And he's here to talk about ayahuasca research that he's been doing and the world of psychedelics being used in medicine. So, Simon, as you like to be known in the medical field, Sai to me, how are you?
I'm not bad. Good to see you again, Martin.
Good stuff. And you've had a busy few months, haven't you? I know that with the pandemic going on, it's been a tough time. You've also been doing some work in A&E recently as well.
Yeah, it's been super tough, as you can imagine. There's been a massive impact on mental health as a result of COVID.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been rushed off our feet, to say the least.
We've spoken about your research, especially in relation to ayahuasca. I guess it'd be great to have a bit of background about what ayahuasca is, kind of the research you've been doing, and also what kind of got you into this. I guess we should start there. Like, why ayahuasca, and why psychiatry? Because growing up, you wanted to be a doctor when you were looking around for psychology at first. When your psychology degrees, you decided that medicine was quite possibly a more preferable way to go for you. And then at what stage were you like psychiatry? And then from there, how did you get to ayahuasca? Because it's quite a niche field, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So I was always super interested with the human mind and people. What made people tick? Interesting people, and specifically what happens when things go wrong. The reason that I decided to do medicine is because I wanted to be a psychiatrist rather than a psychologist. Looking into the kind of the difference in the job roles, the psychiatrist is more to do with diagnosing and prescribing medications and drugs. How did it end up with ayahuasca? That's quite a good question. I'm not entirely sure how that ended up being what I do for a good proportion of my life. I was really interested in transcultural psychiatry, so psychiatry in different cultures and how it differs in different parts of the world, and that led me to work in Uganda for a couple of times. I was working in the capital in an HIV clinic, and then also working in northern Uganda with child soldiers. So that was super interesting and really tough. I decided to have a bit of a break from medicine, and I met somebody in Guatemala who was training to be a curandero, which is the kind of another name for a shaman.
Okay.
And he was telling me all of these amazing stories about ayahuasca, and the psychiatry is fantastic, but it's no exaggeration that we've been using a lot of the same medications for quite a long time. And some of them, I think there's definitely a role for medications, and some have questioned the efficacy of medications in certain conditions. And anyway, he was telling me all of these amazing anecdotes of healing that people have had from ayahuasca, and he invited me to come with him. And so I went with him, and when I got to the place that they were running the ayahuasca ceremonies.
Where was this?
This is in Peru. And when I got there, they had just come up with an idea to try and build a research center, but they didn't have any researchers. And
right, okay.
And so I thought, well, maybe I could kind of put my energy into this, and I drank ayahuasca with him quite a few times, and was blown away by its impact on me, and also the results that I saw with other people. And and then I went back to the UK, spoke to my best mate Nige Netzband, he's a psychologist, and I told him about ayahuasca, and we'd had an interest in drugs and in specifically in psychedelics and how they can be used to treat mental health problems for a while. And told him about it, and we decided that we were going to start researching it, and we were going to do it together. We tried to get some funding, but unsurprisingly, nobody wanted to fund just two guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question that I wanted to definitely ask you. We'll probably come on to a little bit later. But it's not the first thing that people think of when they think of psychiatry, is immediately going to psychedelics. I know in recent years, it was one of the reasons I wanted to get you on here, is because me, Robin, and Alex have been speaking and bringing up some news articles from time to time about how magic mushrooms have been used in kind of microdoses to help people with certain conditions. And so I wanted to get you on to speak about this, because we were speaking it very much from, I guess, the news point of view. And so there is still, I think, this stigma around using psychedelics. Maybe, I don't know how much you feel this is changing. But yeah, how did you kind of get over that initial hurdle of people kind of dismissing it as maybe being a little bit kind of, I don't know, out there or even reckless? I mean, I imagine you've had some people who you've come across who are thinking that it's not the way to go.
Yeah, for sure. I think first of all, the stigma comes from a few things. I think a lot of people associate psychedelics with the 60s, the swinging 60s counterculture movement, and also the fact that they're illegal. I mean, the reasons behind them being illegal are questionable. If drugs are made Schedule 1, if they're not seen to have any therapeutic value, that's one of the criteria. And it's clear that psychedelics do potentially have some kind of therapeutic value, which has led a lot of people to question the motives behind making them illegal. Over 50 years ago, a lot of people think that was actually it was political as a result of the Vietnamese War. The war in Vietnam, and people, the classic, drop acid, not bombs. People taking psychedelics and having a change in their political standpoint, and not wanting to go to war. The research that was done in the 50s, before psychedelics were made illegal, suggested that there could be benefits for mental health, but using psychedelics. But unfortunately, there were a few researchers who were really, really reckless, who helped to tarnish the whole field, and to lead to psychedelics being made illegal.
Okay.
So because of that, there is still this stigma that they could be dangerous. They could send you psychotic, and there are some risks for sure to do with psychosis as well, which I'm sure we'll get onto. But I think that for the majority of well-established organisations, well-established universities, and any sensible scientist, you have to look at the data that we have, which it doesn't say that psychedelics are going to cure everything. It doesn't say, even for sure, that they are going to provide this potential treatment that people think that they might be. But it does suggest that we need to do more research into the area in order to fully investigate their therapeutic potential.
Okay, nice. And so if we move on a little bit to so you're in the Amazon basin, or the Amazon rainforest. What was your kind of hypothesis about what the benefits could be? What were you there for? What were you trying to achieve? What were you trying to bring home that meant that you could then move on to the next stage and hopefully get that funding to kind of move the research forward?
I mean, I guess so. That is what happened. I mean, at the time, I don't think we were thinking. We weren't really thinking that far ahead. We were thinking we could do this study. We have a setup where we could do it, relatively cheaply, and we can put that money towards it ourselves, and then just see what happens. We were looking at the effects of ayahuasca on personality. And the reasons that we wanted to do that is there were so many people going to these ayahuasca retreat centers and drinking ayahuasca, yet nobody seemed to be doing any research into it. There's some research, or quite a lot of research in Brazil, looking at the ayahuasca churches. So that's normally a mix of Christianity with ayahuasca, and there's a lot of research actually looking into that, but none of them looking at these retreat centers normally in the Amazon rainforest. And so we wanted to see what was happening to these people, because if you type ayahuasca into Google, you have all of these amazing anecdotes of people saying that they were cured of these things that they couldn't be cured by in Western medicine, and then also a bunch of people who've died or kind of lost their minds and all these horror stories. So that's what we wanted to look at, to see what's happening to people when they drink ayahuasca. And we found that they, in a nutshell, became less neurotic in the short term, and that was maintained in the long term, 6 months later.
Okay, and so the people going out here, did a lot of these people have underlying, I guess for a better word, mental health issues, or at least some kind of something that could be quantified as a problem that then you saw was not necessarily cured, but remedied as a result of ayahuasca, or are these retreats kind of more recreational?
Yeah, I mean, it's ayahuasca. I would struggle. I'd be surprised if anyone described ayahuasca as a recreational drug. Like,
Okay.
It's definitely not a party drug. Like, it can be the most beautiful and amazing thing you ever experience, and like for sure for a lot of people. But it's also brutal. Like, it can be really, really tough. It's a super powerful psychedelic, one of the most powerful known to man. It's DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is the psychedelic in there. And for many people, when they go, it brings up all of this stuff from their past, all these traumas. It's been described as like having 10 years of psychotherapy in a few hours.
Oh, wow.
People that we see that are on the ayahuasca retreats, there's a range of people that come. There's a lot of people who have tried lots of remedies in the West, and they don't feel that they're being that they've been served well by them. For example, people have been on different antidepressants for years. They've tried therapy. They're still depressed, and then they try ayahuasca. That's quite a common thing. And then there's another group of people who also physical health problems. People have chronic pain, which could be seen as psychological, depending on how you look at it. But some physical health problems too. And then there are people who just don't want to take Western pharmaceuticals and they want to use alternative medicines. And then there's a proportion of people, it's called adventure tourism, people looking for an altered state of consciousness.
Yes. And so was there a specific group? I imagine you divided these groups up into separate categories when looking at kind of the effectiveness of ayahuasca. And what were some of your findings when you came back? It's kind of because you've been in a more advanced field of research now as a result, haven't you? You have received funding as a result.
Yeah, we did get funding.
What successes or results did you see that kind of led to this progressing and not stopping there and then?
Yeah, I think we happened to hit the wave at the right time. We started looking into ayahuasca, and we got these positive results, but also I don't think anyone was particularly surprised by the results that we got. It wasn't breaking news. Ayahuasca helps people. Is that everyone? People wouldn't be going if it didn't help them. Yes. And also, like the indigenous have been using ayahuasca for at least hundreds of years, and probably even longer in some form. So it's not surprising that it does help people. I'd be pretty surprised if all the results we got were either neutral or negative. Yeah. But I think it does. The funding that we got was from the Medical Research Council, which is a branch of the UK government, and I think it shows a trend in the perception of psychedelics and also the way that mental health is going. Looking for new treatments and also being a bit more open-minded now, which is great. I think that's a massive thing, isn't it? I mean, a few years ago, I don't think you would have got the funding, would you? It would have been dismissed as alternative medicine. I mean, that of course is really good, but I think you've still probably got people that are a little bit worried about people taking drugs. Like you said, that there are reports online of people just dying from it. Do you have any more info on whether those reports were true or false, or if there was any kind of stories from the locals in the Amazon of people dying and like kind of the risks that are taken? I mean, the person that immediately popped into my mind when you said that's mum. So for mums everywhere, for sure. Yeah. I mean, if you Google ayahuasca, it's going to come up with, a bunch of people who have died as a result. And there are risks. Because ayahuasca isn't regulated, like there's no regulatory board for ayahuasca across, certainly throughout Peru, and then pretty much in Brazil as well. Although the churches are actually very organized, but it's not like the US or the UK where like medicines or drugs have to go through a quality control. And as a result of that, you don't get a qualification for being a shaman or a curandero. It's just something that you do. A qualified shaman, yeah. Yeah. You don't suddenly pass your shamanic exams. And so because of that, you get a lot of You get a lot of charlatans, and you can understand why, because there are loads of clueless Westerners who are coming over. Many of them, like we said, with the adventure tourism, just looking to blow their brains out with some kind of a psychedelic. And so you get these people who, you can understand why they do it, make a psychedelic concoction, and there are huge amounts of psychedelics in the Amazon. It's a huge pharmacy, and ayahuasca is very specific. And they make these concoctions, which, people have died from them, like, absolutely. So in general, if you go to a reputable place with curanderos and shamans who brew ayahuasca in a safe way, it's extremely safe, really, really safe. There are some contraindications for sure, like if you suffer from psychosis or a personality disorder, then we would screen you out of our studies, and that's the same in most psychedelic studies.
Yeah, is that because it would amplify the effects and just make things? It would bring up, I guess, very current issues that you're suffering from, and wouldn't actually have the remedying effects that you would hope for.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is interesting in itself because this is through a Western lens. So don't give it to people with psychosis or personality disorders. Like, I've seen shamans and curanderos give it to people with psychosis. But their belief as to what psychosis is, or their understanding of what psychosis is, might be slightly different, and they try and treat it in a different way. But from a Western point of view, it could worsen psychosis, or it could even tip you into a psychotic state if you have a predisposition to psychosis. If you have a family history, you don't know about it, or if you suffer from schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, and you're in remission, it could send you back in again.
Okay, so that's going to be one of the biggest concerns, I guess, for people over here in the West and trying to regulate it, is that background check. Like in any study, the background checks have got to be thorough. And if that's not the case, then you can, I guess, at the very least, you can end up in hot water as someone who's studying it. And at the worst, you could cause real damage to someone, potentially. One thing we haven't discussed yet is what ayahuasca actually is. Like you said, it contains DMT. What physically, what is it?
So ayahuasca is a plant brew. So it's a thick, bitter tasting liquid that you drink. And you brew it with the ayahuasca vine, which contains these chemicals called MOAIs, and the vine is called Banisteriopsis caapi. And then you mix it. There can be a variety of things you mix it with. Normally it's with these leaves that are called Psychotria viridis, and they contain DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is it's a really potent psychedelic. Normally, if you were to eat these leaves or consume these leaves, the DMT would just be broken down by the enzymes, the chemicals in your stomach. But the ayahuasca vine contains these MOAIs, which prevent the psychedelic DMT from being broken down. So it gets absorbed into your bloodstream and it goes to your brain, and it causes the psychedelic effects. Okay.
So tell me about your experience with ayahuasca then.
I mean,
can you describe your experience? I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Surely it's going to be a very difficult thing to describe physically just there and there. But I mean, are there any things that come to mind of being kind of especially crazy or interesting, or ways that it helped you?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, you only have words to describe with something that can't be described by words. It's. You can begin to try and describe it, but then you realize it's just. I mean, it's like me asking you to try and draw a dream. You'd probably just draw. And I know that you're drawing, but you'd probably just draw a little thing and be, it didn't look anything like that. Actually, it's a bit like that. It's really, really difficult.
Are we looking at hippie 60s vibrant colours and swirling, whirling faces, or what? I mean, is it quite literal like that?
I mean, there certainly can be a lot of bright colors. It's different for everyone. For sure, you might get some of these kind of the kind of acidy kind of psychedelic visuals. But for many people, it might not be like that, at all. And it might be, reliving memories. Or it might not be visual at all. It might be that your brain is functioning in a different way. It's connecting in a different way, allowing your thought processes to change. So it's really, really variable. But yeah, and then when you say what kind of an impact did it have on me? How has it helped me? I always used to kind of think I don't think it's actually had that much of an impact on me at all. And then someone pointed it out, haven't you devoted most of your, the last kind of 6 years to studying this? So I guess in that way it has. massively.
Yeah, both a physiological and just in a career way as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I mean, it is different to the standard medicines that they're using at the moment. And is there any chance of it kind of being adopted or being kind of widely accepted in Western medicine? Where are we at in terms of ayahuasca, and what's the feedback from the kind of wider medical community? Because you're in a position now where you know, I'm sure that you can point people to papers you've written and studies you've done, talks you've given about this. You know, you're definitely on the cutting edge, and you know, I would say a leader in the field, especially in the UK.
It helps when no one else is doing it.
No one else is doing it. Exactly. You could say that there might be a reason why. Where are we in terms of where your research is at and how people have reacted to it?
Yeah, I mean, the response to the research has been really positive. But again, I think this is part of a wider change in the way that we're perceiving the use of psychedelics and how they can be used medically. And so you said before, like, what is the future of ayahuasca? Is it going to be kind of used in the West? And that's a super tricky question, because there are loads of issues to do with cultural appropriation and you know, the rights of the indigenous, who owns ayahuasca, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Ayahuasca actually looks a little bit like the Belgian beer that you were just drinking.
Really?
Yeah, like that, just a bit darker. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Anyway,
maybe it is.
Maybe it is. Yeah, and I think that people have guessed that psilocybin might be available even on the NHS, or it will be legal to use within the next few years.
And that's in magic mushrooms, right?
That's magic mushrooms. Yeah, that's magic mushrooms. With ayahuasca, it's a bit more tricky, because you ask what is ayahuasca, you know, and I described what the plant brew is. But in many ways, it's not just that. It's the ceremony that comes with it. It's the curandero. It's where you are. It's the space, the maloka. It's the icaros that are sung. It's this whole thing. And the ayahuasca itself is just the substance. If we do begin to see ayahuasca kind of coming to the West and used medically, the way that I see it happening is probably more like we use acupuncture. So acupuncture isn't recommended by the NHS. But it has its own regulatory board, so you can go to a reputable acupuncture place. It's its own kind of regulated, kind of alternative medicine. And we're seeing plant medicines like ayahuasca being decriminalized and even legalized in lots of places around the world, like Oakland and Colorado, and then other places like, you know, Uruguay. And so I think that maybe we'd see kind of ayahuasca centers around the world that are adhering to a certain regulatory standard. But I don't think we're going to have it on the NHS. Although we are potentially starting studies looking at ayahuasca in more lab-based settings. So who knows? Who knows how it'll go.
Oh, really? Okay. You can tell me a little bit about that. Like, how's it transferred from... you say ceremonies. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that involves. But what about kind of the lab setting? It's so different. Do you think that you saying that a part of the ceremony, the experience, is the ayahuasca itself? Do you think by putting it in a lab setting, that completely would change the effect, and maybe the results you see would be different from, well, as you mentioned, from a kind of traditional ceremony?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. It depends on what your perception of ayahuasca is and how it's working. And so the Western point of view would be to say, you know, DMT is a serotonin agonist and it's affecting these receptors, and, you know, and that's kind of leading to, you know, improvements in mood, and it's causing parts of your brain to link up that don't normally link up, something called neuroplasticity, which allows you to have a more objective view of your traumas and think about things in a different way. And the indigenous wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, but I think I know they, because I've spoken to them about it, they would say you're missing the point. You know, it may be functioning in that way, but it's the spirit of the plant. It's the spirits that come down and they work with you energetically, and they allow you to make these changes. So they think that the ayahuasca has a spirit, and that there are lots of spirits. That we're surrounded by spirits, like, and that you can get to know certain spirits. And ayahuasca is almost a vessel that takes you into this realm, this world, where you can communicate with these spirits, and you, through the spirits, they do the work on the participants, and that's how you get healing. And the way that they communicate with the spirits, one of the main ways is through these shamanic songs, these chants called icaros, and they believe that they do this energetically, communicating with the spirits. So if you take ayahuasca away from the shaman and you put it into a lab, I mean, you could take the shaman with you. That'd be amazing, but I'm not really sure which labs are going to let us bring in shamans, and which shamans would want to run ceremonies in labs. Maybe some of them will.
Have the NHS badge, shaman, and then the name.
So if you take it away from the shaman, they would say, that you probably still get positive effects. And there have been studies that have done this. They have taken either ayahuasca in the liquid form, or have freeze-dried it, so made these kind of like ayahuasca pellets. And people right. So you know exactly what's in them, the actual dose. Yes. And then taken that. And they've still got really positive results, really, really positive results. I personally think if you have the shaman there, like, you'd get better results.
Yeah. Do you think that some of that is maybe your belief in mysticism? Not yours personally, but if a person taking it believes that the shaman has a key role in it. I mean, it's almost like, I guess it would almost be like an advanced placebo effect. Like the shaman adds something to the experience.
For sure, yeah, absolutely. Like, without a shadow of a doubt, like the placebo effect's so powerful. And so the thing to do would be to control for the shaman, and kind of hopefully to have studies like with and without a shaman and compare it. But yeah, there's definitely, if you have a belief that it's going to work, then that's bound to have a large impact. But that would certainly be really interesting to control for shaman versus no shaman.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, it's so interesting to hear, because it's such a different. I don't speak to you enough about it enough. I think maybe it's part. I mean, Mum and Dad would definitely be watching this, but it might be due to the fact that they might have slightly different views on these drugs than yourself. That might be why it doesn't come up as often.
I think that it's bound to cause concern, and like. And for me, like when I first started drinking ayahuasca, I was super concerned, and I was thinking, like, am I going to go insane? And then, when I was in the experience, there were times where I was like, I've done it. Oh my God, like I've gone insane. Like, this is it. I've pushed it too far. But I think that, as more and more research comes out, like, and not just kind of anecdotes, like proper, peer-reviewed, published scientific research, that's done through institutions which are really reputable. It's not just ayahuasca. This is like, psilocybin, MDMA, and to a certain degree ketamine as well, I guess. It's hard to look at that data and not come to the same conclusions as the scientists, which is that it does have therapeutic potential when used in the right way. And this is the most important thing, where I think a lot of people go wrong. It's a really different experience taking mushrooms or psilocybin, in a controlled setting in a hospital with psychotherapists, where you deal with all your shit, versus doing it at a festival where you lose all your mates and then you fall in a puddle and it starts raining, and that's it's a really, really different experience. And that's not to say that the recreational use of psilocybin at festivals doesn't have its role. And, for many people, that could be a transformative experience. Why not? But at the same time, we're talking about two really different things, the medical use and recreational use, and there needs to be that distinction.
Yes. I think that's something that's lost with a lot of drugs, isn't it? I mean, you look at the opium epidemic or opioid epidemic in the US and the UK to some extent, with, cheap Chinese fentanyl being cut with heroin. Fentanyl is one of the most common painkillers in hospitals, isn't it? Especially post-surgery. And yet so many people are dying from it outside of hospital. And when used for acute pain in doses for a very short period of time and it's controlled, it can be one of the most effective things out there. But it can have sort of devastating effects when it's not used in those settings, or if it's used irresponsibly. And I guess what you're trying to say is it's kind of a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's all about your relationship to the substance, like, again, opium is like a really good example. Like, you can have heroin, one of the most destructive drugs known to man, or you can have morphine, one of the best painkillers we have. Again, like diazepam, Valium, that can like really relax you, really help with anxiety, all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So many people get hooked on diazepam. It's
Yeah.
all about your relationship to it.
Yeah. Oh man, that's really interesting. So the future of ayahuasca, what's the next stage of research? Where does it go from here? Are other things being done around the world in other countries? I know that you're, in the UK. You guys are the only one.
Yeah, I mean, there are some other ayahuasca researchers floating around the UK now, which is good. But we're the only ones in the UK who are looking at the shamanic use in retreat centres. And there are lots of researchers around the rest of the world. So throughout South America, there are loads. There's a really great team in Barcelona. And in Australia and Melbourne, there are lots of us. The future of ayahuasca is uncertain. I mean, we're continuing our studies now. We're continuing. We have one of our researchers is actually stuck in the Amazon as we speak.
Oh, really? How long have they been there for?
Like 2 months.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So we're setting up new studies looking at everyday traumas and how that can be helped with ayahuasca. But yeah, there are these lab-based studies that are beginning to come out now. So we'll see. I mean, the future of ayahuasca is uncertain, but we do need to be really careful that whatever the future is, we treat it with respect, especially in relation to indigenous knowledge, and make sure there's reciprocity, so that it's not another case of the West taking what's not theirs and profit out of it. And there are some really, if anyone watching this is interested, there are some really great charities that are working towards this that we're associated with. Right. If you go to rain.org, it's all about reforestation. And
RAIN.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's all about reforestation and promoting projects in indigenous communities, giving back in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that politically, especially in Brazil, with a lot of the Amazonian tribes and indigenous people really being under threat, especially under the current political regime. It's definitely, there's an uncertain future for those people, and I guess with that, their traditional customs and medicine, like ayahuasca. So yeah, I guess it's a tough time for those people, and definitely puts a bit of jeopardy over ayahuasca research elsewhere if those kind of traditions get lost. So hopefully that won't be the case.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because there's something called ayahuasca tourism, which is the increasing numbers of people who are flying over to the jungle in the Amazon, and also the spread of ayahuasca globally, which is changing the way that ayahuasca is used. But at the same time, if it's done with respect and it's done in the right way with the indigenous at the forefront, it can actually help to even protect some of these cultures which would otherwise be under threat of being lost. Very much like our own shamanic practices in Europe and in the UK have very much been lost. We don't really know anything about them anymore.
Yes, no, very true, very true. Where can people find more about you and what you're up to and the research you're doing, and also more general research on ayahuasca?
Yeah, sure. So I have Twitter.
I don't follow you on Twitter. What's your Twitter?
It's SGDRUFFELL.
Very good. Yeah, all the initials in there.
Yeah,
very good. I was going to say, I hope you don't have all your medical and doctorate initials in front of them. You've got about 24.
I decided to leave them out this time.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, thank you so much, Si, for taking the opportunity to come and speak about this. It's something that we spoke about a little bit, and there was some really positive feedback from our audience who really wanted to see more. So it's provided me with insight, because I don't speak to you enough about this, and also hopefully it's provided everyone else with a little bit into the wonderful world of what you're doing as well. So thank you so much.
Pleasure, man, and I hope to maybe even see you in the flesh one day soon.
So one day, yeah, exactly. It's been too long. It's been too long with everything that's going on. In fact, as of the time of recording this, I've got my first COVID-19 vaccination tomorrow afternoon. So fingers crossed, everything will be good. Cool. All right. Cheers, Si.
Cool. All right. Take it easy.
Take care. Bye.